The story begins in a Russian prison, where we see a man named Frank Abagnale Jr. Frank is a very clever con artist who has committed some major frauds. At this moment, an FBI agent named Carl has come to take him back to America. Carl is talking to Frank when suddenly Frank starts feeling very sick. At first, Carl thinks Frank is pretending, playing another trick. But then he realizes that no one could fake it so convincingly. He rushes Frank to the hospital as quickly as possible. But Frank takes the opportunity to escape once again. However, the police catch him soon after, and that's when Frank begins to recall his story from the very beginning. Frank was born into a very happy family. His parents loved each other deeply. One day, Frank's father took him to a shop to buy a suit. But the woman at the shop said it was already closed. Immediately, Frank's father pulled out a necklace and said, "Isn't this yours?" The woman was impressed by his charm and said, "No problem, you can buy the suit." Frank's father was very skilled at these little tricks. Then he told Frank to act as his driver and took him to the bank. Soon, the bank manager came to meet them. Frank's father had suffered a huge business loss and needed a loan from the bank. Because of a late tax payment caused by another accountant, he lost a lot of money. But even after explaining everything, no bank was willing to help him. The government seized his car, property, and money. Despite all this, he still opened a bank account for Frank. Frank asked, "Why are you doing this when you're already in debt?" His father replied, "Don't worry about me. Your whole life is ahead of you. Live it well." Suddenly, poverty hit their life hard and Frank had to change schools. On the very first day at the new school, a boy started teasing him, joking that Frank looked like a teacher. Angry at his mockery, Frank decided to actually pretend to be one. He walked into the class and told the real teacher, "What are you doing here? This is my class. I'll teach today, you come later." The poor teacher got confused and left. Frank then humiliated the boy in front of everyone. For an entire week, no one at school realized that a student was pretending to be a teacher. It was only discovered when he was about to take the whole class on a trip. The school then called his parents. His father acted serious in front of the principal but later laughed about it with Frank. One day when Frank came home, he saw another man in his mother's bedroom, a man who worked with his father. His mother tried to act normal and even gave Frank some money, saying, "Go buy something for yourself." But Frank had already understood everything. A few days later, his parents decided to separate. The lawyer asked Frank, "Do you want to live with your mother or your father?" Watching his family break apart shattered him. Unable to bear it, he ran away from home to another city. He didn't have much money, only his checkbook. He started writing checks and giving them to hotels, but as the checks began to bounce, he was kicked out. Then one day an idea struck him: checks can be altered too. It was an older time, so technology wasn't advanced. Frank took advantage of this and started forging checks. He wrote different names and cashed them. If a bank manager refused, he would confidently use one of his father's old tricks, like the necklace trick, and the manager would eventually give in. But slowly, his fraud started being noticed and his checks were being rejected everywhere. One day, he saw a pilot outside a hotel. Everyone respected the pilot. That's when Frank got an idea. Why not become a pilot? Not a real one, a fake one. Then everyone would respect him and his checks would easily get cashed. So, posing as a journalist, he went to an airport claiming to be writing an article on pilots. He gathered all the details about their uniforms and where they were made. He then called the store, pretending to be a pilot, and said his uniform was damaged. Could he get a new one? After a few clever moves, he got a brand new pilot uniform. When he tried to pay by check, the employee said, "No need to pay. Just show your pilot ID and we'll bill the airline directly." Frank used his fake ID and got the uniform for free. Next, Frank went to a bank where he was once ignored. This time, the manager came to him personally and cashed his check. A hotel later told him he could cash even larger checks, as long as they were salary checks. So Frank began making fake salary checks, using toy airplane stickers to make them look authentic. When he took them to the bank, the manager said, "Sir, you can also cash these directly at the airport." Frank liked this idea. At the airport, a receptionist asked if he was flying today. He said yes, and she took him straight into the plane. Pilots could fly for free, but Frank, being fake, was terrified. Still, he stayed confident. He even impressed a beautiful air hostess with the same necklace trick his father used. Frank looked older than his age, so no one suspected he was just around 22 or 23. He started enjoying a luxurious life. He flirted with a bank manager and studied the entire check clearing system, how checks were processed, how account numbers were assigned. He learned that banks use typewriters to encode checks, so he bought the same kind and started printing perfect forgeries. His fraud became more and more professional, and the amounts grew larger. Eventually, the FBI learned about his schemes and assigned Agent Carl to the case. Carl was a serious investigator. One day, Frank met his father again, to whom he used to write letters, pretending he was a real pilot. His father was proud of him. Frank said, "The government took everything from you, so I bought you a car, the same one James Bond drives." But his father refused, saying, "The government is still after me. If I take it, they'll seize it too." Frank offered him money, but his father declined. Meanwhile, Frank mastered the system. He would cash checks from one state in another to avoid detection. The FBI tracked every move and soon reached the hotel where he last cashed a check. After questioning, they learned that Frank was still living there. Everything was already set. Carl, holding his gun, went straight to Frank's room. Frank realized that if he didn't act smart now, he would be caught. So, he quickly pretended to be calm and said, "Relax, I'm from the Secret Service. What do you think? You're the only one looking for this man. The whole government is after him." Carl said, "Show me your ID. Why should I believe that you're who you say you are?" Frank replied, "Do one thing, take my whole wallet. Check it quietly yourself." Carl tried to open the wallet with one hand but struggled. Just then, Frank pointed out the window and said, "Look! Our men have already caught that conman. We got here before you." Downstairs, a neighbor was helping a blind man into a car. From a distance, Carl thought the suspect had actually been caught. This made him believe Frank's story. Frank then picked up all his fake check-making materials and told Carl, "I'll go keep this evidence downstairs. The police should be here soon." Now Carl trusted him completely. He even said, "Here, take your wallet back." But Frank intentionally refused and said, "No, you keep it." He then grabbed all his important stuff and escaped from there. A few minutes later, when Carl finally opened the wallet, he found it empty. The clever conman had escaped right in front of his eyes. Carl felt humiliated. His boss scolded him badly, and in anger, Carl even snapped back at his boss. Meanwhile, the airlines had started noticing how Frank was posing as a pilot. Continuing the same scam was becoming difficult. When the press learned about his tricks, they nicknamed him James Bond. Frank was thrilled by this and started dressing like Bond, even buying a car like him. Time passed and Christmas arrived. Carl was alone, working late in his office, when suddenly Frank called. He said, "I want to apologize for everything I've done to you." He even gave Carl his address. But Carl replied, "You're trying to trap me again, aren't you? Not this time." Then he said, "You may have all the money, but you're lonely, that's why you're calling me." Frank was hurt by those words and hung up. But this time he was telling the truth. He had actually given his real address. Carl then realized from earlier clues, like when Frank once used the fake name Barry Allen, a comic book character, that Frank was just a kid pretending to be older. That's why they couldn't track him. Carl ordered a list of runaway children whose parents might have filed reports. After some investigation, he finally reached Frank's home and met his mother. When shown a photo, she confirmed, "Yes, that's my son." Carl told her, "Your son is a big-time con man. If you learn anything about him, inform the police." Frank's mother replied, "Oh, he's just a child. He must have taken a little money just to eat. I'll repay it. How much does he owe? Carl said, $1.4 million. Hearing this, Frank's mother was completely stunned. Meanwhile, Frank was living a luxurious life in another city. One day, he went to a hospital for some work, where he saw a nurse named Brenda crying because a doctor had scolded her. Frank comforted her, saying, "Don't worry. You're amazing. That doctor's crazy." At that moment, a new idea struck him. He asked Brenda if there were any job openings there. Since posing as a pilot had become risky, he decided to become a doctor next. He forged a Harvard medical degree and went for an interview. The hospital doctors were amazed. "Sir, you want to work in our small hospital?" Frank, having watched plenty of doctor movies, knew how to act. He said, "I want to help people in small towns, not big cities." Impressed, they hired him instantly. He didn't actually do any medical work, just gave random advice to other doctors. In his free time, he grew close to Brenda, and soon they fell in love. One day, an emergency arrived. A young boy had been seriously injured. Seeing all the blood, Frank panicked. Still, pretending to be confident, he told another doctor, "What would you do here?" The doctor answered, and Frank said, "Exactly. Perfect plan. I trust you completely. I'll come back later to check." And he quickly walked out, terrified inside. Meanwhile, Carl met Frank's father and told him about all of Frank's crimes. Frank's father said, "I don't know where he is, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you." Carl realized the father and son were very close. He must be sending letters. So Carl examined the letters and deduced where Frank was living. He prepared to go there with the police. Back at the hospital, Frank and Brenda's love deepened. One day, Brenda broke down in tears, confessing, "I once had an abortion. After that, my father threw me out." Frank thought for a moment and said, "What if I speak to your father about marrying you? Would he accept you then?" Brenda was touched and agreed. Frank went to meet her father, who was a lawyer. So Frank claimed, "I used to be a lawyer too, before becoming a doctor." Having watched legal dramas, he managed to impress everyone with his words. Brenda's father asked, "Tell me honestly, what do you see in my daughter?" Frank replied, "I'm just an ordinary man who loves her." Her father was deeply impressed. Frank then asked, "If I want to practice law here, what should I do?" Her father said, "You've already been to law school, so you just need to pass one exam." Frank actually studied and passed the exam, officially becoming a lawyer. Then the story cuts back to the present, where Carl has finally arrested Frank. Carl asked, "How did you even pass that exam?" Frank smirked and said, "Does it matter? You're taking me to jail, not to court." The story flashed back again, showing Frank bonding with Brenda's family, preparing for their wedding. He told his father, "We'll get back everything the government took from us. Then we'll bring Mom back too, and we'll all live together again." But his father told him, "Your mother has married someone else." This broke Frank's heart. As soon as Frank heard this, he was deeply shocked and left the place. That night, Frank called Carl and told him, "I'm getting married. Whatever happened between us, I want to forget it all." Now Frank wanted all the charges against him to be dropped. But Carl replied, "I'll never let you go. As long as I'm in this job, I'll keep chasing you. You can't escape after everything you've done." After this, Carl came up with an idea. He knew that after marriage, Frank wouldn't be able to change his name. So he ordered a search everywhere under the name Frank used when he posed as a doctor. He also realized that a wedding invitation must have been printed somewhere, so he began tracking those as well. Finally, Frank's wedding took place, and all the agents arrived there. Seeing them, Frank quickly took Brenda to his room. Frank confessed everything to Brenda, that he had been fooling people all his life, but his love for her was real. He said, "I'm running away tonight. Meet me at the airport and don't tell anyone where you're going." The next day, Frank waited at the airport for Brenda. She did come, but not alone. She was accompanied by federal agents. Now it became extremely difficult for Frank to escape. Then he came up with another clever idea. He went to a college and announced that his airline was hiring many air hostesses. After conducting fake interviews, he selected several beautiful girls. Surrounded by them and dressed in his pilot uniform, Frank walked confidently into the airport. All the officers got distracted by the women's beauty, and Frank slipped away easily. Meanwhile, a boy who looked like Frank was standing outside the airport with a car. All the FBI agents rushed toward him and arrested him, but the boy said, "A man paid me to stand here." Using this trick, Frank cleverly escaped from the country. After that, he carried out many frauds in different countries. The last location traced for Frank was a printing press where he was making checks. Carl told his seniors, "Let me go. I'll bring him back." But they refused. "We couldn't catch him in our own country. How will you do it abroad?" Carl dug deeper and discovered that Frank had now started printing his own checks. He knew Frank was in Russia, but Russia is a huge country. Where exactly? Then he remembered that Frank's mother was from a small village in Russia. After researching further, he found out that there was indeed a printing press there. It was Christmas Eve once again. Carl reached that village and finally found Frank. Frank said, "Come, I'll show you around. Let's go outside." Carl warned him, "Don't even think of running. The local police will shoot you." Carl said, "If you surrender now, I can save you." Frank asked, "Swear on your children." Carl swore and said, "Trust me, I'm telling the truth." So Frank put on the handcuffs himself. But when they stepped outside, there was no one there. For a moment, Frank thought Carl had fooled him. But within seconds, several police cars arrived. Now the story jumps back to the present. Carl and Frank were about to land in America. Frank said, "I want to talk to my father." Carl, with a heavy heart, told him, "Your father is dead. He slipped in the bathroom." Hearing this, Frank was devastated. He locked himself in the plane's bathroom and cried loudly. As the plane was about to land, Carl broke open the door when Frank didn't come out. But by then, Frank had unscrewed the sink and crawled into the plane's inner section. The moment the landing gears opened, Frank jumped out and escaped. That night, he went straight to see his mother. He saw that she had built a new family and even had a little daughter now. Carl knew Frank would come to his mother, so he reached there and arrested him again. Frank was still under 19 years old. Carl wanted him to be treated as a minor, but the government wanted to give him the harshest punishment possible for such massive frauds. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, in complete isolation with no one to talk to. One day, Carl came to visit him. Someone else was committing the same kind of frauds Frank used to. Carl showed him one of the fake checks. Frank looked at it once and immediately said, "Here's the mistake, see?" Carl realized that only Frank could help stop such crimes. Next time, Carl brought other FBI agents, and they were impressed by Frank's skill. Gradually, Carl managed to get Frank released and offered him a job at the FBI. Now he had to work 8 hours a day. Life had given him another chance, but if he tried to run away again, he'd get 50 years in prison. Frank tried to focus on work but got bored. He even erased his own records from the FBI system and planned to flee abroad over the weekend. But Carl stopped him and said, "Look, you're still young. Life is giving you another chance, take it. If you run, you'll spend your whole life in jail. I won't stop you, but be back on Monday." Frank left. Carl waited anxiously on Monday, thinking maybe Frank had escaped again. But Frank came back and soon became an expert at solving fraud cases. Later, Frank met a woman, got married, and built a good life. After making a name for himself at the FBI, he started his own company dedicated to preventing bank frauds. After all, who better to catch a thief than a former master thief himself? This is a true story. In the end, Frank became a millionaire the right way. If you like the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel.